The essence of democracy. Democracy is often celebrated as the most just and equitable form of governance. At its core, it means rule by the people, originating from the Greek words demos, people, and kratos, power. But democracy is not merely a system where the majority votes and the outcome is enforced. Rather, it is a complex political framework grounded in principles such as equality, liberty, rule of law, and the protection of fundamental rights for all, not just the majority. Democracy, if reduced to nothing more than majority rule, risks becoming a tyranny of the majority. When the will of the majority is allowed to override the basic rights and interests of minorities, democracy ceases to be democratic. The legitimacy of democratic governance depends not only on electoral procedures, but also on its commitment to pluralism, justice, and the inherent dignity of every human being. Defining democracy beyond majority rule. In popular perception, democracy is synonymous with elections, voting, and parliamentary representation. While these are essential mechanisms of democratic governance, they are not sufficient by themselves. A true democracy includes constitutional limits on governmental power, rule of law ensuring that everyone, including those in power, are subject to the same legal standards, fundamental rights, such as freedom of speech, religion, and association, checks and balances preventing any one branch or group from dominating, protection of minorities both in law and practice. Thus, democracy is not just a matter of who gets to decide, but how decisions are made and whose voices are respected in the process. 2. The problem with pure majoritarianism. Majoritarianism, the belief that the majority should always have its way, presents a fundamental danger when it overrides rights and institutional protections. Alexis de Tocqueville, the 19th century French thinker, warned of the tyranny of the majority in his seminal work, Democracy in America. According to him, unchecked majority rule can be just as oppressive as the rule of a king or dictator. Examples of such tyranny include racial segregation in the U.S. For decades, white majorities in southern states upheld Jim Crow laws that systematically oppressed black citizens, despite those laws being passed through democratic procedures. Laws discriminating against religious minorities. In many democratic countries, religious minorities have been subject to legal or social exclusion due to populist pressures from dominant groups. Exclusionary immigration policies. Driven by nationalist majorities, some democracies have closed their borders or denied basic rights to immigrant populations. These examples illustrate that majoritarian rule without constitutional constraints leads not to justice, but to institutionalized injustice. 3. Minority rights. A cornerstone of democratic society. Minority rights are not privileges granted by the majority, but essential components of a functioning democracy. They serve several crucial purposes. 1. Preserving human dignity. Every individual, regardless of background, ethnicity, religion, or belief, possesses inalienable rights. Democracies must guarantee those rights not only through laws, but through practice and enforcement. A system that allows the majority to strip these rights from minorities undermines its own moral foundation. 2. Ensuring long-term stability. Societies that ignore or suppress minority interests often face unrest, resistance, and even civil conflict. Stable democracies are inclusive. They integrate different voices, reducing the likelihood of alienation and division. 3. Enriching public discourse. Minority groups contribute diverse perspectives that can challenge mainstream narratives and promote innovation, social awareness, and progress. A democracy that silences minorities stagnates intellectually and morally. 4. Serving as a moral compass. Minorities often play the role of moral conscience within a society, advocating for justice, reform, and empathy. Historical progress, such as women's suffrage, civil rights, or LGBTQ+ recognition, often began with minority advocacy against majority opinion. IV. Legal and institutional safeguards for minorities. To protect minorities within democracies, certain legal and institutional mechanisms are essential. Constitutional protections. Most modern democracies include bills of rights or constitutional articles that guarantee freedom of religion, speech, association, and protection from discrimination. These cannot be overridden by majority vote. Courts must be empowered to review and strike down laws or policies that violate minority rights, regardless of how popular they are. International International conventions, global instruments such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, and various UN treaties bind democratic states to uphold certain standards regardless of domestic majorities. Proportional representation and federalism. Electoral systems that give voice to minority political parties or local governance models that allow cultural autonomy help ensure that minorities are not overwhelmed by national majorities. V. Democracy and moral responsibility. True democracy is not just a numbers game, it is a moral commitment. It demands that citizens recognize each other's humanity and build a shared future, not just for those in power or those in the majority, but for everyone. A citizen in a democracy bears responsibility not only to vote, but to remain informed, compassionate, and attentive to those who differ from them. Tolerance, empathy, and dialogue are not optional in a pluralistic society. They are necessary conditions for democracy to flourish. Case study: the dangers of populist majoritarianism. Recent global political trends show the dangers of ignoring minority rights under the guise of democratic legitimacy. Hungary under Viktor Orban has been widely criticized for dismantling judicial independence, silencing press freedom, and targeting migrants, Roma people, and LGBTQ+ groups, all while maintaining electoral majorities. India under Narendra Modi has seen increasing pressure on religious minorities, especially Muslims, through citizenship laws and mob violence, despite being the world's largest democracy. Myanmar's Rohingya crisis represents the ultimate breakdown of democracy, where even elected leaders failed to protect ethnic minorities from military-led genocide. In each case, the democratic process was present, but the democratic spirit, respect for all people, was absent. A 7. The way forward: building inclusive democracies. To ensure democracy remains robust, certain cultural and civic attitudes must be cultivated. 1. Civic education. Citizens should be taught not only the mechanics of voting, but also the values of democratic coexistence, rights, and tolerance from a young age. 2. Pluralist media and discourse. Democracies must nurture diverse media ecosystems that amplify marginalized voices and counter dangerous majoritarian narratives. 3. Deliberative democracy. Beyond voting, citizens should be engaged in dialogue, participatory budgeting, local councils, and consensus-building processes. 4. Active civil society. NGOs, community organizations, and advocacy groups are vital to defending minority rights and holding governments accountable. Conclusion: democracy is more than the will of the majority. Democracy is not simply the rule of the majority. It is the rule of the people with respect for the individual. Without legal constraints, ethical norms, and cultural commitments to pluralism, majoritarian rule can devolve into oppression. A true democracy protects its most vulnerable, embraces its diversity, and ensures that no one, no matter how small the group, is left voiceless or defenseless. In the end, democracy's greatness lies not in allowing the majority to get its way, but in ensuring that everyone has a place at the table. When we ignore that, we risk not only injustice, we risk the collapse of democracy itself.